Owen Jones was a stubbly Welshman from the Steuben Hills who spent most of his adult life trapping in the Adirondacks. He made his headquarters at Horn Lake and was known far and wide as an eccentric, somewhat cantankerous fellow who possessed the Welsh trait of sticking to his own way of thinking at all costs. Somewhere along the way, Jones had picked up the nickname of Kettle. To the Welsh in the Adirondack Foothills, such names were commonly used to distinguish one member of a Welsh tribe from another, for the Welsh had a scarcity of given names, and there might be dozens of Owen Joneses in Steuben and Remsen. The only plausible explanation for the nickname lies in the old lye kettle in which Jones concocted from the juices of wild fruits, berries, and herbs a pleasant-smelling liquor, which had the kick of a whole mule train. Kettle had a trained raccoon, which sat at a table with him at mealtime. He had trained the animal to dip bread into coffee, soup, or liquor, raise it to its mouth, and eat it. Kettle was not a heavy drinker, and there is no record of the liquor having over-affected either him or the raccoon. But visitors who were invited to drink what Kettle called his belly wash usually saw dozens of kettles and raccoons before passing out. The trained raccoon entranced hunters, particularly city sports, who knew it was impossible to train a raccoon, and Kettle received flattering offers for his pet. The Welshman usually laughed off any suggestion for parting with the raccoon, but as the offers grew in size, he decided to make hay while the sun shone. A hunter came along and Kettle parted with the pet to the tune of gold. Other hunters appeared, saw a raccoon dipping bread into Kettle's brew, and took it along. Soon, Kettle found himself in the raccoon business. The bubble burst toward fall, when customers began to discover that each purchaser had returned the raccoon to Kettle when it had refused to perform its routine away from its trainer, and that Kettle had promptly resold it to new purchasers. Kettle and his raccoon were then left to eat their meals without outside interference. In his wanderings, Kettle was constantly on the lookout for gold, for he felt sure that the precious metal could be found in the Adirondacks. On one occasion, he took a few of his samples to Hamilton College for assay, and said nothing about the results. He did, however, carry around with him pieces of lead, which he claimed he had found during his prospecting trips. When Kettle returned from his trip to Hamilton College, he discovered that someone had blazed a trail to his camp, so he moved down to a new camp on North Lake, where he came into contact with Atwell Martin. Kettle was cantankerous, to be sure, but he was also a man who sought companionship, so he tried to make up to Atwell. That hermit refused to have anything to do with Kettle until he got a taste of the Welshman's belly wash. Under the influence of that fragrant brew, he was willing to listen to Kettle's plan for building a dugout that they could both use on the lake in jacking deer. The two hermits from the Steuben Hills made a dugout, which they launched under the stimulus of a bottle of belly wash. They hunted together all summer, and a beautiful friendship seemed to be in the making for the cantankerous Welshman and the aloof Martin. One night in the fall, the two hermits were out on North Lake jacking deer. Atwell's lamp, tied to a jackstaff in the prow of the dugout, was luring deer to its light. Atwell guided the unwieldy dugout from the stern, while Kettle sat in the waist of the boat with his musket primed. Kettle and Atwell saw the deer at the same time. Atwell swung the dugout around into a gust of wind at the moment Kettle let fly with his musket. In an instant, all was darkness, for Kettle, upset his aim by Atwell's maneuvering of the dugout, had shot off the jackstaff, and Atwell's lamp had disappeared into the black water. The two hermits sat and argued in the darkness. Kettle maintained that a blunderer like Atwell should never handle a paddle, while Martin told Kettle that anyone who couldn't shoot around a jackstaff should be banned from North Lake. They got back to shore safely, but that was the end of a perfect friendship. The next day they sawed the dugout in two, each taking half. Atwell, to show his scorn of Kettle's marksmanship, set up two jackstaffs on his boat and swung his new lamp between them.